It is my absolute pleasure to warmly welcome Professor Lekha Pandit from Nitte University, Mangalore, India. She is Professor of Neurology and Director of Center of Advanced Neurological Research from India. Very keen and interested in multiple sclerosis and neuroimmunological disorders. A very warm welcome to you, Lekha. This is on behalf of World Federation Neurology World Brain Day team.
Thank you, Tissa. It's so good that you've invited me and given me an opportunity to be part of this great movement.
So tell our viewers who you are and how did you become interested in neurology, and a little bit about your hospital, the state. I know you live in a very beautiful part of India. Haven't been there yet. So
Sure.
tell our viewers what sort of place it is and how your day-to-day life is.
Yes. So I'm basically trained in internal medicine and general neurology in India itself, in one of the southern states of India where I currently live. And I had great opportunity to go forward with my interest, particularly in demyelinating disorders. Some of the patients I saw during the latter end of my training was what inspired me to focus on demyelinating disorders in general. And I was welcomed as a postdoc fellow at the Royal Victoria Infirmary and the University of Newcastle by none other than Professor David Bates, who is an expert in MS at this time. And I had a great time working with him in his MS clinic and being part of his drug trials and interferon at that time. And I learned that MS, treatments are essentially multidisciplinary, having to look at so many aspects in way the disease touches, the person. Again, after coming back home, I had another opportunity to come back to the United Kingdom, this time as a Jacqueline Dupre awardee of the Multiple Sclerosis International Federation. And I had an opportunity to work at Cambridge at Addenbrooke's Hospital with Dr. Stephen Saucer, who is again a world-renowned MS genetics expert, apart from being a brilliant clinician. So armed with all this training, when I came back to India and settled down in Mangalore in the southwest of India, I set up the Mangalore Demyelinating Disease Registry at my university, the Nitte University, which is a private deemed to be university in the state of Karnataka. And initially it was just a hospital-based registry, but over the years, since 2007, we gradually had patients trickling in, and it has now expanded into a regional referral center. And we have currently on our records more than 1,500 patients with variety of demyelinating disorders, and approximately half of them are multiple sclerosis patients. So my university has been extremely supportive in all the initiatives that I have taken, providing me with subsidized care in the hospital for inpatient and outpatients. And we have devised several novel methods of treating patients with cost-effective therapies, about which I will speak to you down the line in the discussion on how we manage MS in India. And I'm also a researcher, so I have been funded by the government of India and also by my university. And we have brought out a lot of India-specific information regarding MS. For example, we brought out the first population-based prevalence study on MS, and we found by a conservative estimate that MS is around 8 per 100,000. And till then, we believed that MS was rare. It was less than 1 per 100,000, and our information kind of fast-forwarded people's thinking about the burden of disease in our country, considering the population of, the denominator is 1.4 billion. We also looked at genetic susceptibility, and we were not unsurprised to find that susceptibility is the same as for white Europeans. And we also came up with a lot of interesting environmental association results, all of which have helped us to be better prepared in our understanding of MS within our region.
I think you mentioned some alarming statistics. 8 per 1,000 is almost
8
as
per
close
100. 8 per 100,000.
Right, 8 per 100,000. I
Yeah.
thought it was 8 per 1,000. If it is 8 per
No,
1,000,
no.
then it is very close to epilepsy, but not far. It's 8 per
Yeah.
100,000. Right, right.
Yeah.
So that means it is still reasonably prevalent. So it cannot be regarded as a rare disease, then, isn't it?
That is the irony, you know, when you define rare diseases, you say less than 20 per 100,000 would be considered as a rare disease by most standards. However, if you look at 1.4 billion, you're looking at least within 1 million of people living in our country with MS, you know, at least 75,000, even by the most conservative estimates. So that's a huge number.
I think the other aspect is I don't want to convert you. You are already converted. If you look at the therapeutics or therapeutic advances in neurology, when you look at stroke, epilepsy, rest of the other movement disorders and other subspecialties, I think multiple sclerosis is probably the queen when it comes to therapeutics. We could almost stop multiple sclerosis with the advances in therapeutics, although they're expensive. That's a different story. Would you agree that the advances in neurology is probably the most forefront is neuroimmunology?
Absolutely, especially with the advent of monoclonal antibody therapies, you know, they are changing the face of how we treat immunological disorders, be it MS or any other autoimmune, neurological and non-neurological diseases. Yes, it has made a great difference for those who can afford.
And I'm sure when you came back from the Newcastle and having done all those fellowships, you would be pleased to hear that our partner in crime this time is indeed the Multiple Sclerosis Federation International. So
Absolutely.
World Federation Neurology every year select a partner in crime, one of the other international organizations to go global with our advocacy campaigns. And this year it is MSIF. So what I was trying to get at is when you come back from UK, have you had challenges to set up multiple sclerosis services in southern part of India?
Absolutely. There were several challenges. Most importantly, to insist that this is a disease that deserves attention. Most people, even the neurology community, were undecided. Is it a disease that is common enough to be given importance? Because stroke, epilepsy, Parkinson's is something that flows out of the mouth of every layperson and every neurologist. When it comes to demyelinating disorders, most of us were trained in an era when we believed it to be purely a European person's disease and that it is uncommon. But with the advent of MRI scans, with the advent of more specialist training in the field, I think there has been a slow but definite change in attitudes. And that has helped me to fight for the cause of MS, to be able to put up a proposal at the level of the National Indian Academy of Neurology to introduce a subspecialty in neurology. Autoimmune disorders subspecialty has been started now. And our trainees and our junior doctors have now become much more aware through constant meetings, interactions. It has helped us a lot. And at the level of the funding too, the funding opportunities have increased. They have gone beyond strokes, epilepsies, and infectious disorders now to fund disorders such as demyelinating disorders. And I have been very fortunate in being funded. And currently, even as I speak to you, the Indian Council of Medical Research has a task force study now to study the in MS nationally at the national level. And we are all, several of my colleagues and I are partners in this task force. And that shows the change in thinking and the change over time.
So the lesson for the youngsters is don't give up, persevere with your dreams and advocate for your patients, so you can't go wrong.
Absolutely, the pressure is enormous on me. Here I am qualified to diagnose a disease for which there is least awareness, there is least availability of resources. And every day it is a question of innovating, inventing, finding ways and means of keeping your patient well with affordable care. That is the greatest challenge I face.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. Before we go further, as you are aware, World Federation Neurology join hands with Multiple Sclerosis Federation International and World Health Organization and several other international organizations to advocate for better care for multiple sclerosis with the ambitious theme, Stop Multiple Sclerosis. How excited are you to see that there is a global movement for the first time in history to advocate for multiple sclerosis worldwide?
So it's absolutely exciting to have multiple sclerosis on the global screen. And the logo is also very catchy, and it hints to the fact that here's a disease that you thought was not treatable, but appears to be that you can stop the progress of the disease if you treat. So that is tremendously helpful. And at the same time, I think it draws attention to the international community, how inequitable treatment choices are governed by financial resources. And therefore, in a way, it also focuses on the need to bring about a change to make people aware that we have to be involved in a global effort to help people to get treatments where they can't.
Absolutely. I don't know whether you know, I am originally from Sri Lanka, and I indeed saw my first multiple sclerosis patient in Sri Lanka as a young medical student also, although the MRI was a rarity even at that time. Every time when I visit Sri Lanka, usually I visit a couple of times per year. This is the longest that I have not been to Sri Lanka since the COVID pandemic travel restrictions. My heart sink as a patient or two would come and find me wherever I was staying, whether I'm with my parents or my wife's family or in a friend's place or in a hotel attending a conference. There's always one or two MS patients would come and see me, and one of the first questions that they ask is how can they access medications, which was impossible for them up until recently. But I was just told by one of my Sri Lankan colleagues that they got access to interferon, at least in government hospital settings through neurologists' prescription. Now, my question to you is, tell us about how you get affordable care with innovation and new thinking when the equity is absolutely in an unbearable way, different from different parts of the world.
So the reality is that, chronic diseases requiring lifelong treatment are a drain on the financial resources of the caregiver. Most of them are young women who are looked after by their family or by their newly married spouses. And it's extremely difficult for them to have a chronic illness for which money has to go every month. This is simply because there is no universal healthcare in my country and in several other countries in the same bracket. There's no treatment reimbursement for the majority. So out-of-pocket spending is the main source. And I looked at pretty dire statistics put out by the Global Burden of Disease Health Financing Network, they project that even by the year 2050, this dismal scene is going to remain, with out-of-pocket spending being the chief means by which people living in low and middle income countries will support themselves. So it is very good to say that we should have top-down reforms, healthcare reforms at the governmental level, at the pharma industry, and so on and so forth. And they are all laudable and very logical goals to have, but are they feasible? Are they implementable in every country? That's a big question. But time is running short for the person who is who has this disease. And in this background, I feel the burden of keeping patients well falls on people like me, healthcare providers and primary caregivers. And so what we have decided with the backing of my institution is that we will concentrate on our strength. In India, we are the land of generics, nobody would dispute that. We have a variety of generic multiple sclerosis first-line DMTs, disease-modifying agents like dimethyl fumarate, fingolimod, teriflunomide, all of which have come into the market, which are effective, supplied by companies which have good manufacturing practices and who export drugs outside the country. So the quality of their drugs are good. And they come at a fraction of the cost of the original molecules that have to be imported. So that is one way. For patients who can't afford that, we go off to off-label therapies with immunosuppressants. The generic versions are even more cheaper, and I'm talking about azathioprine, mycophenolate, and rituximab biosimilars, which are extremely affordable. So what we do is that we incentivize pharma companies by expanding their local market, by giving them these prescriptions. And they give us special pricing and reduce further by directly supplying from a licensed retailer to my pharmacy. All of that is legal. And my university is very, very supportive of these practices. So drugs are dispensed from our hospital pharmacy against our prescriptions. We even courier drugs to patients. So therefore, that has helped greatly during this pandemic period, especially to maintain continuity of care. The interesting thing about all these is that the patient rapport with us is stronger. So they keep in touch with us regularly for at least topping up their prescriptions, and it gives us an opportunity to see the efficacy of these drugs and monitor the side effects as well. And then we are the land of WhatsApp and of cell phones. India probably uses one of the large countries with the largest number of cell phone users, and patients are in contact with my clinical coordinator who's dedicated to follow up of these patients. So we can assure safety and we can monitor efficacy of these drugs. Besides these, we even offer subsidized inpatient care. We have novel methods of cutting costs for MRI scans, for rehabilitation. So at every level, we try to encourage and keep these patients on treatment. And as a result, we are able to monitor them longitudinally over years. There are several who have opted out of therapy for various reasons. And they still remain in touch with us, telling us how they are and how their life is, so that we have a follow-up even on those patients who fall out of therapy. So this works out very well for us. And I think this is something which is doable in other countries with the kind of situations that I face.
So these generic, the medications, Lekha, can they be accessible to other countries also eventually, do you think, or is it a long way ahead yet?
So you're talking about your Sri Lankan patients. So I have patients in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, in Bangladesh, US, UAE, expats who directly approach the companies who are able to provide that to those who are willing to come and collect the medication at periods of time, offering them the same subsidized medication. So that is one way of overcoming it. When I had a talk with the pharma companies, they said it depends upon the regulatory authorities in different countries. For example, I'm told that in certain countries, they do not allow generics to be brought in when there are patent protected drugs available simultaneously. So I think these situations can be worked on, provided the country's regulatory authorities are willing and open to discussions, when our pharma companies will really be happy to expand their market. And this is happening for a variety of drugs. India is the major supplier of generics to the US and to Europe, and even to South America. So I don't see that it cannot be done. I'm sure if world organizations intervene, and there are ways and means in which there can be interactions between companies and the regulatory authorities of these countries, I'm sure some solutions can be reached.
The reason that I asked that question is not only because of Sri Lanka. I read somewhere that despite some of the interferons went onto generic brands, the cost of interferons in USA market has continually going up and up and up rather than going down. I can't remember off the top of my head what the prices are, but generics, at least in that land, what I heard at different meetings is had not come down. But this is a question that I could, I guess, pose some other people later on when I interview in USA.
Yeah.
One last question to you. What is your message to young neurologists worldwide and the trainees and medical students, focusing particularly in low to middle income countries. What is your message to them?
I think everybody should follow their dreams. They shouldn't allow anything to come in the way. And, like I heard somebody who was very famous say, everybody can have a good idea, but it's how you follow it up and see it to fruition that determines how your life goes. So yeah, essentially shaped by the choices you make. Neurology is such a fascinating subject. The more you dig in, the more interesting it becomes. And if you have a primary focus, nothing like it. India has a huge population load and you can never be short of patients. Seeing them carefully, documenting them, following them up, seeing them after an intervention, you have already become a clinical researcher. So there is so much to do if you have the right mindset.
Thank you very much, Lekha. Any final messages that you wanted to talk about that we didn't address?
I feel I would really like to talk about the management of MS from a regional perspective. You see, we are often chasing Western standards of treatment. We devise treatment regimes based on the best available in the market. So when we have standards laid out like that, countries like mine are always falling behind. Very often the opportunity to treat with maybe with less expensive options are not considered because X, Y, or Z medicine is not available or is not affordable to the patient. So my appeal, and I think I would bring this up at several fora. I am writing an editorial on this in a multiple sclerosis journal shortly, and I will touch on this as well, that there is a real need to develop local treatment guidelines that incorporate regionally available drugs that include generics off-label therapies. These panels can be empowered with international experts. They can critique it, modify it, and if they are approved or endorsed by world bodies, then they would have even more additional credibility. You bring up the question of efficacy. When I discuss these at many forums, they say, how do you know they are efficacious? How do you know they are safe? Well, you need to go by the available literature. We have a lot of publications in our in local journals, which are peer-reviewed, which talk about the use of these drugs and the efficacy. And recently, we had a lovely paper from one of my colleagues, which showed the efficacy of biosimilar, locally made biosimilar rituximab in the management of MS, an excellent paper, which was published in an international journal. So look to these for evidence, class 3, class 4 evidence. Audit our hospital databases, look at the drug manufacturing qualities, and then come up with a decision as to whether this drug with the available data is efficacious. Of course, you should insert safety measures on how you would follow up these patients. In the same way, they have mentioned safety measures in Europe and US for off-label therapies. So those would go a great way towards making treatments more acceptable and providing a wider range of solutions rather than concentrating on the narrow few expensive top-level drugs, which are simply not affordable. And the other thing is improving awareness among the medical community, which is so very important. How to differentiate MS from other disorders which mimic MS, how you would, the need for early treatment, what kind of therapies you would use at different levels of the disease. And there are so many things that we need to do. But as long as we keep trying, I think we will find pragmatic solutions to look after our patients. And I really want to acknowledge my wonderful patients, their caregivers who have put their faith in me. And I want to put their welfare foremost and let them know I'm constantly seeking opportunities to make their lives better.
Lekha, I absolutely agree. I think it is very important, irrespective of where you are, you should keep studying your patients and keep writing. I remember vividly my first mentor in neurology back in Sri Lanka. He published a series of papers in New England Journal of Medicine, and I remember as an inquisitive medical student, I asked from him how hard it was for him to do research, being the single sort of a professor of medicine interested in neurology, catering for a large number of patients. He looked me in the eyes and said that it is very easy. All you need to do is to keep answering questions and keep asking questions and keep writing them up. And how true
absolutely.
That is. But sadly, it is still a limited number of people from regional centers do that. And we I think the medical journal community is partly responsible for this also. When I was entrusted upon taking up the editor-in-chief position of Neurology International, I told the management that part of the era is going to be supporting Asia and Africa in particular, because they are the difficult, the academics who has trouble getting their papers published. It is very important that of course, they need to go through peer review and they need to have high standards as well, but we need to support them to share those ideas as the problems are local and solutions should come from some local work also.
Absolutely.
Rather than all sort of a foreign told. The same I have seen when we were advocating for stroke care. It is very hard for you to go to a sort of institute in the developing world and then tell them that you should put this many $1 million to set up a stroke service. You rather build a stroke service with what they have as best as you can, rather than sort of creating something that they cannot have for the next 50 years with the resources that they have. And to address your last point, to raise awareness of our colleagues and patients, this was the whole idea of bringing World Brain Day theme. What we normally do is we put a lot of sleepless nights together to create a really user-friendly, straightforward toolbox with very simple messages on a chosen disease, and we keep them available and let them owned by local experts like you, and then use them to propagate awareness campaigns throughout the campaign. So that's the whole idea. So WFN and MSIF is right behind you on all your advocacy activities, at least for the next couple of months. So use them as if they belong to you, and you can convert them to any language that you like. We don't have the capacity to test them, but we are very happy to keep a repository on WFN website and post them permanently so that people can use them later on. And the WFN leadership, as much as possible, we would be very happy to virtually visit as much as needed to support your campaigns throughout the campaign. I think one of the good things about this pandemic, although there are a lot of bad things, one, it has reminded us how critically important neuroimmunology is. Immunology seems to be everything. That's what we are learning from COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 neurological issues. And the second thing is, at least it has bring equity to education worldwide. We can basically attend any meeting anywhere from your desktop if you have time. Previously, it was impossible. Even if you had money, the time and travel is not possible for everybody. But this has bring some sort of equity. So let's hope that the academic community worldwide would unified among single concept promoting better brain health. And you have our full support to all the activities that you do, and keep up doing the good work.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And stay safe and stay well, and keep us informed. And you are more than welcome to write to World Neurology with your advocacy activities, and our editor would be more than pleased to publish them also.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care, Lekha, and thank you for your time.